Welcome to Grace Fellowship Baptist Church Wednesday evening Bible study for Wednesday, October 13th, 2021. Today is Monday, October 4th, 2021, and we are in the Samson story, and we are in Judges chapter 14. Last week we talked about Samson's parents, Manoah and his wife, and how they had a miraculous birth, and the angel appeared to them and told them they were going to have a son, and they didn't realize it was a spiritual being. They thought it was a human being, and then the angel, ascended in the smoke from the sacrifice, and they finally realized it, and you know, they were obedient to God. They were told to raise their son as a Nazarite, and they did, and they're the kind of parents you would want to be. We're going to start in chapter 14 tonight, and we're start dealing with Samson himself. And unfortunately, Samson did not follow after his parents, but he's still the man God meant him to be. Chapter 14, verse 1. Samson went down to Timnah and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, "I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as a wife." Now, this is not the culture. Children in that culture did not select their own spouses. This was a family affair. The parents, or even the whole clan, selected it. And you were very often told, "You will marry so-and-so." And it was a family decision. And very often the young folks had no say in it. If they did have a say, it was more of a consulting say. It's like, you're going to marry one of this man's daughters, and he has two of them up for marriage. This one, which one of the two do you want? Is more very often how the decision making went if the young man was involved. The woman very often had less choice than that. It's like, you will marry into that clan. Young people didn't go out and date each other and decide, "Oh, I like this one." If they did get to know somebody and mention to their parents, "Hey, I like this one. Please get them into marriage." Then the parents would go ahead and vet them and negotiate with their parents and see, is this an option? Is this a good option? Does my son have some wisdom in who he wants to marry? That would be the way that would be done. But if so, it would be with somebody that he knew and they knew, and they knew the eligibility and everything to start with. And for an Israelite, that they would automatically be trying to marry another Israelite. That he's going to want to marry a Philistine? This is just, and he chose it himself. This is absolute outrage. He's disobedient to his parents to the max. He's almost in the danger of them calling him before the elders at the gate and saying, "Stone our son, he's disobedient, a drunkard, and following the law of Moses, and let's wipe him from the earth." It's a horror. It's a horror to his parents. It's a horror to the community. It's probably a horror to the Philistines. They didn't have the culture that the children could go choose their own spouse. It was chosen for them, just like the Israelites. So verse 3. His father and mother replied, "Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife?" They're incredulous. They're God-fearing people. Why are you going to the heathen foreigners that don't obey God? Can't you at least go to people who nominally worship God? to some of your relatives in the clan? If you don't want somebody in the clan, can you at least pick an Israelite that worships Yahweh? Go on, son. You're a Nazarite. You're dedicated to God. Don't defile yourself with these nasty women. They're horrified. But Samson said to his father, "Get her for me. She's the right one for me." What? A disobedient son. In that culture, you did not order your dad around. And he's just seen her. He hasn't talked to her. He doesn't know anything about her. How does he know? It's obvious from the context. He's just in lust. He just wants to have sex. He don't care about whether the marriage is a good one or not. He does not thinking about long term. He's just thinking about his own pleasure. She's pretty arm candy. Get her for me. Ouch. Verse 4. His parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines, for at that time they were ruling over Israel. Samson went down to Timnah together with his father and mother. As they approached the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring toward him. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him in power, so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, as he might have torn a young goat. But he told neither his father nor his mother what he had done. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and he liked her. Now, there's several things going on, and because the recording here in Judges is attempting to do this in chronological order, he puts several themes together in this paragraph that were kind of unusual to put together. Let's start with the first part of it and the last part of it, and then deal with the middle part. His parents, didn't understand what's going on. They're heartbroken. They're thinking their son's being disobedient, that he's going to break his Nazarite vows, that God's not going to bless their son. It's only in retrospective, after Samson's dead, when this story is being recorded, that you can see that God is beginning the process of confronting the Philistines. The Israelites are beginning to, after 40 years of being ruled by the Philistines, get used to the Philistines ruling and getting used to Philistine rule. And they're just subjugated people under a different conqueror. And let's face it, 40 years is a long time. Their culture is beginning to shift. Their culture is beginning to change. They're beginning to get along with this foreign occupier. They're beginning to lose hope that Yahweh is going to save them. Honestly, the last people that remember being free of the Philistines are old folks. Let's face it, 45 was the average life expectancy approximately at this point in time. So, if they were 5 when the Philistines started ruling, they're nearing their ancient expected life expectancy. Some people live longer. There's probably people that are 65 and 70 and 80 that can remember and tell you. But they're the old folks. They're, some of the young folks will think they're so geriatric, they're just talking off their head. They don't really know what they're talking about. They have no experience with what the old folks will be telling them about Yahweh and Yahweh giving them freedom, and they don't understand. The culture's already shifted enough that the young folks don't understand the stories and don't understand that Moses and Joshua gave them freedom in this land, and that they should own it and possess it for themselves and shouldn't be under the rule of the Philistines. They're beginning to accept that we're just the slaves of the Philistines. And God needs to break that up. And how he's going to do that is by by the passions of this young man. He's going to break social conventions. He's going to break the way things do, and he's got an amazing power. And he's going to use his passions to make confrontations that he doesn't care if the Philistines are upset with him. He's a strong-willed young man. He's ordering his parents around in a culture where nobody ordered parents around or grandparents. They respected them. And you respected your elders and you respected your overlords, even if they weren't from your clan. And, here, he didn't care about his parents' opinion. He didn't care about the Philistines' opinion. He wants what he wants, and he's going to get it. Never mind that nobody thinks it's a great idea. But God's using his passions to start this confrontation where he's going to start the destruction of the Philistines. And so it's from God that he's lusting after Philistine women. But it's only in hindsight they get that. If you and I were living at that time, we would think, this young fool is set up for destruction. And yes, he's set up for destruction, but he's going to do God's work first. And that's kind of the point. He's going to start what God wants him to start. He's going to start people rebelling against the Philistines and realizing that they, as the people of God, have to act like the people of God and not act like the Philistine slaves. And God's going to do that in a very unusual way. He's going to take a man who is a slave to his own passions. He doesn't care about social convention. He's self-absorbed. He's narcissistic. He thinks he sets what's right and wrong. And he's going to follow his own will. Yeah, that's not how I would picture God using somebody. I don't picture him taking a narcissistic man who ignores God and making him the hero. That's not who I picture as heroic. Probably not who you think is heroic. Yet we think Samson's heroic. In one sense, he's not a hero. He's absolutely not a hero. Now, he does heroic things because he's self-absorbed and he has physical strength and he has passions and he doesn't care about the consequences. He's going to do what he's going to do. And God has given him some unusual abilities to do amazing things. And he's strong enough willed that he gets his parents, in a culture where the parents rule, to go do what he wants done. And so then he goes and gets them to go down to Timnah with him, and they interview this woman. And he's just seen her before this. Now he actually gets to talk to her, and he likes her personality. The equivalent in today is somebody sees a porn star online and goes, I like her, I want to go marry her. And they get to go meet her, and they actually do like her. That day and culture, it'd be just as unusual as today. No, most people, when they meet somebody like that, would be like, yeah, I don't like this person. You don't normally see a picture of somebody and like their personality. God's clearly working in Samson's heart to stir up trouble. And Samson's fixing to stir up trouble. And, God stirs his heart to actually like what he sees when he talks to her. Now, in between that is jammed this little story that tells us several things about him. On the way, he meets a lion in a vineyard. And he's strong enough that he goes up and with his bare hands kills the lion and tears it apart with his bare hands. Now, you and I don't think of going into the cage with a lion and killing it with our bare hands. You know, when I think of an individual going one-on-one with a lion, I think of the example about 5 years ago where a Japanese tourist was touring Africa and was upset that the lions were just laying around in the heat of the day sleeping, and he wants to get a better film, so he walks out there and kicks a lion. And if you remember the story, he dies. And yeah, everybody else in the tour bus gets some really interesting footage, horrifying footage. But yeah, he didn't survive the encounter with kicking a lion. The lion won. Well, Samson goes picks a fight with a lion in a disadvantaged situation, and he wins. And apparently he wins without getting injured because his parents didn't know he did it. You know, if I'm going to go attack a lion, I'm probably going to use a weapon and probably not get close, but he does it with his bare hands. I'm going to expect, you know, I'm likely to get injured and need to be medically treated. He goes in and does it and doesn't get injured. He's that strong. He's that fast. He's that good at fighting that he can kill a lion with his bare hands without being injured. Now that's phenomenal. I don't care who you are. That's phenomenal. God has given him some amazing ability. And if he was obedient to God and using it as a fighting man, the Israelites would have probably had Samson land instead of Philistia next door to them. You know, they would have named the whole territory after him, and he would have been somebody that would still be honored greatly today. Now, we honor him, but we honor him more for his foolishness and stupidity, but for starting the process of causing rebellion. But, you know, he's following his passions. And he kills this lion, and he just leaves it in the vineyard. Now, the thing is, if it wasn't time to trim the vines, and it wasn't time to harvest the grapes, and there'd been adequate rain, probably nobody was visiting the vineyard. They would have not known that there's a dead lion in the vineyard. Nobody, you don't go check on vineyards all the time. They just kind of grow on their own. And particularly in that day and time, if you had a vineyard, it was enclosed, and you had a gate on it, and people just didn't go in there routinely. And if a lion was probably hiding from humans by going in there, found that, oh, I'm not bothered when I go in there. And Samson went in there, and the lion was probably as surprised by Samson there. Probably Samson had to jump on it. But even at that, Samson killed the lion without being injured. That's amazing. And then Samson just leaves the body there. Tells us several things about Samson. He's a strong man. He's a good fighter. He's brave. He's fearless. He doesn't reckon the cost. He just goes in and does what he knows he can do. If he had been smart and wise about it, he could have been a great leader, a great man of God. But he's not. He's narcissistic, and he just does things for his own pleasure. And, he probably does it in self-defense, he thinks, but God had a bigger purpose. Um, he's going to use that occurrence to pick a fight with the Philistines. Now, Samson doesn't see that. He just, yeah, I killed a lion. He's going to later get in a position where he needs to have this experience used, and then he's going to be mad because of how it's used, and then he's going to start the fight. But he doesn't even tell his parents, hey, of course, they may have known he was that kind of strong and that kind of quick, and he may have killed lions before. He may have had some experience, and but he didn't even bother to tell them, like, this isn't unusual for me. I just did it. He may have been afraid that, if I tell them, they're not going to let me go off to the vineyard to relieve myself. The implication is he went to where people wouldn't see him peeing on the side of the road. You know, that's kind of the implication is he's going off and comes running back, catches up with him. Verse 8. Sometime later, when he went back to marry her, so his parents arranged the marriage, and it takes some time. There's some negotiation, and families have to negotiate, and what's the bride price, and who's going to live where, and who's going to pay for the wedding feast, and where is it going to be held, and who's are going to be the guests, etc., etc. And let's face it, the Philistines are probably not really enthused about marrying one of their daughters to a Hebrew. I mean, the Hebrews are the slaves. Who wants to marry their daughter to a slave? And who are you, Manoah? And who's your son Samson? And why do we care that he wants to marry one of our daughters? Manoah is probably having to pay a pretty high bride price to get this, and they may be thinking, oh, well, okay, maybe, Samson looks like a nice, strong young man. He might be nice to have in the clan, but, maybe help keep the rest of the Israelites calm if we let somebody like him marry into our clan. So it's going to take some time, and, all that gets resolved, and he goes back to marry her. It comes time for the wedding. Anyway, continuing verse 8. He turned aside to look at the lion's carcass. In other words, he's curious. I killed it. What happened to it? Is it decomposing? Somebody find it and take it off and bury it? He's just curious. Go look at it. And so he does. In it was a swarm of bees and some honey, which he scooped out with his hand and ate as he went along. When he rejoined his parents, he gave them some, and they too ate it. But he did not tell them that he'd taken the honey from the lion's carcass. In other words, he didn't tell them he killed the lion, and he definitely didn't tell them that he had done something that would have broke his Nazirite vows. He touched a dead, unclean animal and got food out of it and ate it. Let's face it, he reached in a beehive to get the honey out. He's a pain-intolerant guy. You don't just reach into a beehive and grab honey lightly. You're going to be covered up in mad bees. They don't like you stealing their honey. And it's been a while. The lion's carcass is obviously probably dried out for them to have a hollow that they could build in. And they found it and built a nest in it. It takes several weeks for them to get honeycomb built and filled full of honey. So they've been at it a while. And nobody's done anything with the lion carcass. Nobody's apparently seen it. Um, if they'd seen it, I mean, let's face it, the locals would have known, hey, there's a lion carcass full of bees. They haven't been in the vineyard since he killed the lion. Nobody knows. That becomes obvious later, because nobody knows to answer the riddle. Nobody's recognized that there's beehive in a lion carcass. Samson may be the only person on the face of the earth right at this point knows that there's a beehive in a lion carcass. And what possessed him to reach in a beehive in a lion carcass and get honey out and eat it? I mean, who does that? Well, he did. He obviously wanted some honey, and he's so used to getting his own way that I want the honey. I don't care if it's bees. I don't care if I get stung. I want the honey. And he eats some, and as he comes back to his parents, he's still eating honey. And he goes, "Hey, Dad, Mom, I got some honey. You want some too?" He's being nice. They eat the honey too. Hey, honey's a real treat. Yeah, sure, Dad. We're glad, son, you're actually sharing with us. We enjoy the honey too. And they don't ask dumb questions like, "Where did you get the honey? You went to the vineyard and you came back out and you had honey. Okay, me as a dad, I'd be like, son, did you break into somebody else's beehive? Am I fixing to have to pay damages to the hive owner?" you know, they didn't. They were like, "Sure, I'd love some honey." I think God was blinding them to the possibilities. It wasn't real apiary. The keeping of bees was not a real good science yet. A lot of bees were just natural beehives and allowed to exist. So, if you'd found a beehive on somebody else's property, they might have thought, okay, it's not that somebody owns a beehive, it's just they happen to be on somebody's property, and he got some honey out of it. They were probably thinking, poor guy, he's been stung. Yeah, we'll at least enjoy the honey. If he took the pain, we'll enjoy it too. But, he's got bee stings on him. He has to have had bee stings on him. At least his hands and face. Even if he's covered up the rest of his body in, robes and stuff, and sleeves, and, he's got to be bee stung. And he doesn't tell him the story of how he got honey. He keeps on going. He's a tough guy. He doesn't care about bee stings. He just cares about the honey. He doesn't care that he's fixing to get the Philistines mad. He just cares about his lust. Verse 10. Now his father went down to see the woman, and Samson made a feast there, as was customary for the bridegrooms. When he appeared, he was given 30 companions. So the Philistines are going, okay, we're going to let this guy marry into our group. We got to have a wedding feast, and the bridegroom host the meal, and he needs companions for the meal, and he's going to throw the traditional meal, and and apparently their custom was you needed 30 men as wedding guests, and so they provide him the guest. He's going to feed them a big meal. He's going to feed 30 men. He's going to have a grand party. They're getting to know him. He's getting to know them. They're thinking, yeah, we're adding him to our group, and here's his 30 closest companions, and we're going to have him as part of us. And, we're not going to send her to his clan. He's going to come join our clan. This is the appearance that they have from this wedding feast. And they're taking the profit. Yeah, we've got the bride price. His dad's paid the dowry. but we're going to get the feasts. We're not going to let him go back to his home and feast his people. We're going to get to eat. And so, and it wasn't just a one afternoon meal. This was a long celebration. Verse 12. Now let me tell you a riddle, Samson said to them. If you can give me the answer within the 7 days of the feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. But if you can't tell me the answer, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. So Samson thinks he is clever. He thinks he's smart. He thinks he's going to get wealthy from this. I mean, he thinks he's going to end up with 30 sets of clothes. Most people in that day and time have one, maybe one change. Most people, their clothes were sewn on them in the spring, and then they wore out, and the next spring you cut them off and you burned them, and you put a new set of clothing sewn on you, and you didn't have a spare set of clothing. If you were decently wealthy, you had a set of underwear you wore year round, and then took it off the next year and burned it, and then you might have your everyday clothes that you wore all the time, and then you took them off on special occasions and put on special clothes. For weddings, most people would have a new set of clothes they wore for the wedding, but then for the next year, that's what they wore, and then they'd go back to their normal cycle. He's proposing, I'm going to come out of this with my everyday clothes on, and you're going to give me 30 linen garments, which were special, and 30 sets of clothes. So I'm going to come out of this with 31 sets of clothes. I could change clothes every day. He's going to come out of this a wealthy man because he thinks he's got this riddle that nobody can solve. He thinks he's being so clever. So he gives him this rhythm. And he's basically making a bet that they can't figure out his riddle. Now, he proposes what sounds like a fair bet. You give me 30 sets of clothes, one each, if I win. If not, I give you 30 sets of clothes, one for each one of you, if you win. And they think this is more than fair because there's 30 of them, and they can discuss it, and they can discuss it with their townsfolks, and everybody can put their heads together. And what's the chances of 30 men not being able to figure out a riddle, or 30 men and their 30 families not being able to figure out this riddle? And they think, hey, this is a good deal. And riddles were common in the ancient world and were a great source of pride. And Samson's thinking he's so smart, he has this riddle nobody can figure out. And honestly, he does have a riddle that people aren't going to figure out with their own intellect. But it's not because he's smarter than them. It's because he's done things that nobody can think would be done. And he's gone and done things that neither the Philistines nor the Israelites would think are done. Killing a lion with your bare hands, it drying out on its own with nobody noticing, a beehive being built in it, and then you going in and harvesting honey out of the hive. Yeah, nobody thinks of any of those things happening, and they haven't gone to the vineyard and seen the lion, and so nobody puts two and two together. And so they're quite happy with this. They think, hey, one riddle, and there's 30 of us to figure it out, and one of him, and the chances of us not figuring it out are really slim. I mean, we got wise men in our village, and we can ask around, and this is a slam dunk. It looks like a fair, but yeah, no, we we got the advantage. We're gonna get you, Samson. You're gonna have to give us 30 sets of garments, 30 linen garments, which would be the underclothes, and 30 outer garments, which you know, they're gonna become middle class people just from attending a week's wedding. Oh, they think this is a great deal. So they say, "Tell us the riddle," they say. "Let's hear it." He replied, "Out of the eater something to eat, out of the strong something sweet." For 3 days they could not give the answer. So, I mean, they're sitting around this party, eating and drinking and having a great time, and they can't come up with it. And for 3 days, they're just clueless. And they're beginning to get kind of desperate. They were expecting, riddles. Most people, solved them within a day or two. They figure a week, 30 of us, we're going to. And after 3 days, they're beginning to realize, whoa, we not going to figure this one out. And we're getting kind of desperate. And they've probably consulted with their families, and none of their relatives know. This isn't a riddle anybody's heard before. It's not something they can recognize how you're going to solve this one. Um, and the word's beginning to spread in the village. Hey, those guys made a bet that sounded like a sure thing, and it looks like they're going to lose. And meaningly, this is day 3 of a 7-day feast, but nobody in the village knows how to solve this riddle. And then they got a little bit smarter. Okay, we've consulted with our families, we've consulted with wise folks in the village, the old elders. Everybody's discussed it, nobody knows the answer. Maybe his wife does. They're kind of close, they've been talking. Let's ask her. On the 4th day, they said to Samson's wife, "Coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us, or we will burn you and your father's household to death. Did you invite us here to rob us?" So they're threatening her. Hey, hey, coax him, get him to tell you the answer, then come tell us the answer, and then, everything's going to be all right. And if you don't, if you're going to side with him, you and your whole family, your dad's family, all your siblings, yeah, we're killing them all. We're burning them all to death. Yeah, the Philistines aren't happy. They've decided to threaten violence and get her to do their dirty work for them. Verse 16, then Samson's wife threw herself on him, sobbing, "You hate me. You don't really love me. You've given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer." Oh, can't you see the drama? She wants to know the answer, so she's a drama queen. We know that much about her. Of course, he probably likes the drama queen because that kind of personality does like a drama queen. So, he's he gets his what he wants there. He explains, "I haven't even explained it to my father or mother," he replied. "So why should I explain it to you?" She cried the whole 7 days of the feast. So on the 7th day he finally told her. Because she continued to press him, she in turn explained the riddle to her people. So, starting on day 4, she starts working on him, and she cries, and she carries on, and she just finally wears him down. I think the 30 companions knew that she would wear him down, or at least hoped that. And so they, set her up. And they know what she's like. They've lived with her whole life. There's probably a reason that she's not married. Nobody wants to marry her because she's a drama queen. She uses her wiles on him. And on the 7th day, he finally gets tired of her nagging about it and all the drama that she's causing. And he finally tells her. Yeah. At first, he says, "Hey, I haven't even told my parents. They don't even know. Nobody knows the answer other than me." And but he's not that mentally strong. Like most narcissists, um, he's not really all that emotionally strong. And she manipulates and she wheedles and she whines and she cries and she carries on. And eventually he gives in before the end of the 7 days. Now, once she has the answer, she immediately knows what to do with it. She goes out to her people and she tells them the answer because that's what she's supposed to do. She's got it. She's won, and she's going to tell her people, and she's going to protect her family. Um, she's protecting her people. She really doesn't care about Samson. She's not, emotionally Samson's. She's knows she's fixing to marry him because that's what the clan says, but she's more aligned with her people and the 30 guys that are the companions, not Samson. Verse 18. Before sunset on the 7th day, the men of the town say to him, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" Samson said to them, "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle." He knows immediately what happened. That they give him the answer. He knows the only person he's told, and he knows she's told on him. And he twists a saying that was in that day, an idiom, and he's basically accusing them of being intimate with his wife when he hasn't gotten a chance to yet. Now, he's not necessarily saying sexually intimate, but Philistine culture, they worship the Baals where, several times a year they had religious festivals where there were orgies. Nobody expected virginity. Nobody even expected faithfulness within a marriage in Philistine culture. It was just not part of the religion. You didn't expect it. You just expected this was the person who most of the time you dealt with your sexual needs. But there were certain times a year when it was perfectly acceptable to go into your next door neighbor's wife or the woman down the street or the woman in the next town. And there was times and places where you traveled off across the countryside to such and such a shrine where the temple prostitutes were, and you paid a price and you worshipped God with the woman sexually. I mean, that was part of the culture, and she may have been a temple prostitute at one time or something. And the temple prostitutes were probably, from all we can tell, very good at wheedling secrets out of people. Okay, yeah, you pay me the price the priests say you need to have sex with me, but I need something more than just the price that you're supposed to pay. I need to know what that secret is between what really happened between you and that other neighbor. And then once she learns the secret, then she goes whispers to the priest who's trying to solve the mystery of what happened between those two neighbors. And then, a couple of weeks later, he does his big pronouncement. I've consulted with the gods, and here's what the gods told me. And, most of the people are like, wow, God told him things. No. The priest knew, like, hey, so-and-so's fixing to come into you and pay the price. Get me some information. I need to know something. That's how things worked. And the priest looked really wise and smart and figuring things out. And, it did help make society function better, more fairly, etc. But it was not just. It was not God's way. It was highly immoral. And, they've used this now. They've used him. They've used that sexual immorality. And he's accusing them of it. He's telling them they have. That they're more intimate with his wife than he is. And he's realized he's been used, that she wheedled it out of him to go tell his people, to tell her people, and that he's now going to have to pay 30 pieces of linen undergarment and 30 outer clothes. He doesn't have it. He's now deep in debt. That's on top of having to pay for the feast for 7 days. He's hurting. Verse 19. Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon him in power. He went down to Ashkelon, struck down 30 of their men, stripped them of their belongings, and gave their clothes to those who explained the riddle. Burning with anger, he went up to his father's house, and Samson's wife was given to the friend who had attended him at the wedding. The implication is it's given to his best man instead of him. So he went about 30 miles down the road, murdered 30 men, stripped them naked, and came back with the clothes. And apparently he did this overnight. 60-mile round trip, murdered 30 people, stripped them of clothes, and came back. That's an amazing trip right there. It's an amazing amount of mayhem that he was able to do. And it's not amazing that he's angry. I mean, he's just been had by a whole town. And, from the few narcissists I've known personally, I would have expected him to immediately go, now give me my wife, and poor woman's going to suffer for his anger. But he's so angry, he just ignores the woman, and he goes back to his father's house, which is about 15 miles away. So, poor man, since sundown, has traveled 75 miles in anger, committed 30 murders, stripped people of clothing. I mean, he's done a whole lot, and he's still so angry he can't see straight, and he goes back home. Well, his dad goes, hey, we've had the wedding feast. Y'all got your presents. She needs to be married. The best man is there to take over the duties of the husband in case he's not able to. That was the original purpose of the best man, is you were promising you were going to protect this woman and provide for her financially in case the bride can't, the groom can't. And so, the dad goes, well, he left, so best man, you've got a wife. And he marries her off. He's being very cultural. God was setting this up, using Samson to start this fight. And Samson thinks he's so smart, so shrewd, and he's not. He can't plan ahead like most narcissists. He can't. Our culture right now is overrun with narcissists. I hate naming examples because I don't care what side you're on. There's one on your side, and there's a bunch on the other side. And you can all point fingers at everybody else's side and say how terrible they are. But none of them are really wise. They all think they're really a whole lot smarter than they think they are, than they really are. And they take a lot more credit than they should. And Samson's this way, and governed by emotions and not by thought processes. And the only way he can get away with it is he's so blinking strong. Let's face it, he can murder 30 men after running 30 miles and strip them of clothes and run back, and nobody asking him any questions. He gets away with it. Of course, the Philistine culture, there's a lot of violence, and so, Ashkelon wakes up in the morning and there's 30 murders. They probably like, oh, somebody was mad last night. They're all naked. Now that's kind of odd, but okay, whatever. They're not going to ask and connect it down to, um, oh, this Hebrew was trying to marry a Philistine and he got mad and he had to pay, yeah, a bet, a bad bet. They're not going to connect it. They're not going to come back after Samson. Now, Samson's going to get mad at his father-in-law for marrying his wife off because he thinks he deserves her. I mean, he's paid this high price and he's paid bride price. He's had the wedding feast for 7 days. He's gotten 30 sets of clothing. He's been cheated every which way. And now that he's calmed down, he's going to want to get back. But that's next week's lesson. At this point, we just see the foolishness of Samson, and we see his character. He doesn't obey God. He's not worshiping Yahweh. He's unconcerned with the things of the Lord. He's just following his own passion. He's so strong he can get away with it for the short term. And he's still so young that he can and will. But he's not planning ahead. He had no plan for what happened if he loses this bet. He was expecting to get 30 sets of clothing. He never thought, what's going to happen if I lose? Because, I mean, if he'd planned it, yeah, he might have planned, okay, I go to some other city, kill 30 men, get their clothes, and come back and pay it off. But then I grab my wife. I mean, if I'm the kind of guy that if I'd done something like that, I would have planned, okay, I'm strong enough I can commit 30 murders and steal the clothes and go make the bet. But in my anger, I would have grabbed the woman and said, you're coming home with me. You're married to me. I've paid this price. You're going to be my wife. I wouldn't have left her. I wouldn't have left it for whatever her dad decides is the right thing to do. I wouldn't have apparently abandoned her. I would have been the kind of mad that, no, you're coming home with me, honey. Now, I'm also a guy that plans long term. I think that's one of the characteristics God gave me. He didn't give me a lot of strength. If I went to a vineyard and there was a lion, I'd be scrambling over the wall, over the fence. See you later. Mom and Dad, let's just keep going. Somebody watch the back. I hope somebody's got a sword. I hope somebody's got a spear. We may be in trouble. That'd be me. I wouldn't have been like, oh, it's a lion. Snap its neck. I'm done. No. And I wouldn't have been the kind of guy that'd been curious. Oh, I wonder, next time I go by, I wonder what that lion is like. Is there another den of lions living there? Let's check. Oh, there's bees in there. I like honey. I don't care if I'm stung. No. I'd be like, that's odd. There's bees in the carcass. Somebody needs to get that hive into a better hive. That'd been me. I wouldn't have been reaching into a beehive to get some honey. But, okay. We see Samson doesn't think long term. He only deals with his own emotions and his own wants and his own desires. And he doesn't understand that other people are going to think and plot and carry things out. He doesn't ever realize what somebody else is going to do. He should have known that his father-in-law was not going to leave her unmarried after the wedding feast. Somebody was going to marry her. He at least should have gone into his father-in-law and said, give me my wife. He didn't. And then when he comes back, he's going to be upset. So he's a great fool. And that's his character. His parents, godly people. raised him well, and he's a fool, and he doesn't worship Yahweh. He doesn't care about God's law. He doesn't care about obeying God, but God's still going to use him. Gracious Lord, I ask that we be people that while you're going to use us, regardless of who we are and what we are, and sometimes use us in our foolishness, Lord, I ask us to be pliable to your will, that we'll understand your will and intentionally live for you, and intentionally so that we can get blessings out of it too, not just be used for what you want us to do. Have us to be people who are wise enough that when we see you working, even in foolish, disobedient people, that we'll realize that you're doing it for your purpose, that you're not blessing them, that they may be cursed because of what they're doing, even if you use it for your good and good of your kingdom. Help us to be the kind of people who think ahead and plot ahead and plan ahead and do your will to achieve your purposes instead of being used by you to do your purposes. Have us to be used of you to do your purpose because we cooperate with you and that we actively work on doing your will. Lord, help us to be that kind of humble people. Help us to not be foolish and following our own desires, which are sinful and fallen and broken, but following your will and doing what you want us to do. In your gracious name, amen. And I hope to see you Wednesday, and if not, I'll see you Sunday, and if not, I'll see you back here next Wednesday. Y'all have a blessed week.